Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending upon where you're joining us from, but a very warm welcome from the Association of Colleges of the Sisters of St. Joseph. The Association of Colleges of the Sisters of St. Joseph is a consortium of 9 colleges and universities founded by the Sisters of St. Joseph. I'm Martha Malinsky, the Executive Director of the association, and so pleased that you're able to join us today for our Student Motivation and Preparedness workshop. This is the second of 4 faculty development workshops we are offering this spring. Just a few reminders, this and all workshops in our series are being recorded and will be available on our website, and participants will be sent an email after this workshop with the link. The workshop is also being offered in a meeting format to allow interaction among colleagues. There's over 60 to 70 colleagues that will be joining us today. So please be sure that your microphone is muted. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the chief academic officers at the 9 ACSSJ institutions sought to identify a speaker or series of speakers who would address what we have learned in regards to the dynamics of the pandemic and their impact on teaching and learning across our institutions. In seeking this expertise, we noted a need for more evidence-based work that informed our institutions about faculty experiences and the strategies they could use or were using to adapting their work to the changing needs of learners post-pandemic. Today's workshop represents our interest in lifting up the voices and expertise of our faculty and staff at ACSSJ institutions and to develop an evidence base to support our work. Our moderator and panelists will share their work and perspectives regarding the initial analysis of a survey of ACSSJ faculty that yielded 292 responses and focused on faculty perceptions of 1, student experiences and needs, and secondly, changes in or enhancements to their approaches to teaching. Thank you to Chris Doherty from Chestnut Hill College and all of the chief academic officers who continue to make contributions to this work. Thank you too to Margaret McLean, Vice President for Academic Affairs at the College of St. Rose for hosting these events, and others who have joined us today in making this event possible. The first draft of the survey report will be shared with participants who have registered today. With that, I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Anita Thomas, Executive Vice President and Provost at St. Catherine University. Thank you for joining us. Anita?
Thank you, Martha, for that. And good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are and which time zone you're in. As Martha has said, we have been spending some time as the provost really listening to faculty and staff concerns about the transitions that happen in COVID and the impact not just on our work as faculty and staff, but as we look at students and some of their changing needs, how to best address them. We have created this 4-panel workshop series as a way to get all of the faculty and staff across our sister institutions to really be able to share some best practices, to think about some common concerns that we are seeing. Today, we're really focusing on student engagement and persistence and motivation. I think that I normally would say that the Generation Z, Gen Alpha, now the group, have certainly had their own issues around engagement and motivation as our connection to learning and technology and applications has changed. We certainly know that this group of students has probably higher levels of mental health than we have seen in the past. We certainly know that there are more neurodiversity issues in this generation and class of students. About 16% are coming in with actual diagnoses around mental health in particular. And the effects that we've seen on COVID in terms of motivation and persistence and engagement, I think have exacerbated some of those changes that we were already seeing. We are delighted for our panelists to share with you today their areas of expertise, their work with students around motivation, engagement, and persistence. And each of them will talk for about 7 minutes on their observations and share some feedback and best practices. We will then open it up to questions from the group. So I am pleased to introduce our 3 panelists for today, and they will each speak in turn, and then we'll go to questions. We have Jennifer Granger Sullivan, Stacy Dean, and Nicole Montero. I think that, Jennifer, we are starting with you.
Sure, we can kick it off with me. Hello, everybody. I'll first start by saying that I lost my voice, but it kind of came back today, so we're excited for that. But I want to first just thank everyone for joining us today. And I want to say that my name is Dr. Jennifer Granger Sullivan, and I am the Director of Experiential Learning at Elms College. I've been working to coordinate and expand and also enhance our opportunities for community-based learning and engagement since fall 2021. Before Elms, I worked for 15 plus years in student activities, leadership, and orientation within higher ed. I am very passionate about providing students access, aiding in their engagement and persistence, and I'm very excited to be with you today. Do you want me to keep talking, or do you want everyone to introduce themselves?
Let's go ahead, and Stacy unmuted, so let's let Stacy introduce herself.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Stacy Dean. I am from St. Catherine University. I direct our O'Neill Center for Academic Development. Part of my work is also coordinating an academic enrichment program called LEAP that includes an extended orientation for first-year students. My background is in rhetoric and composition, and I also teach writing. So some of the examples I'll be talking today are focused on writing in the writing class. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Nicole Montero, and I am one of the core graduate faculty members at Chestnut Hill College in our master's program in clinical and counseling psychology. I am the advisor for the trauma concentration, and I'm a licensed psychologist. And so my background, I have background in trauma, but also before coming to higher ed as a faculty member, I spent time working in college mental health. So I used to be at the Columbia University Counseling Center. And so even though that was years ago, there were always talks about sort of challenges that current students face that those of us who are now in positions of either teaching or other administrative positions didn't quite understand. And so it's a familiar conversation for me. And I like to kind of bring a trauma-informed lens and also a generational lens to think about these issues.
Well, Nicole, why don't you go ahead and start first with your remarks?
Okay, so once again, thank you so much for the invitation to be a part of this panel and to share some of my observations and hopefully a few useful tips, because I think it's something that all of us as faculty members are observing. And the other thing with COVID is we're experiencing it too. So this is an event where things that our students were going through, we were simultaneously experiencing, although in a different way. But my colleagues and I have had many conversations about how just within 3 or 4 years, we've seen a shift in terms of our students. And again, I'm working mostly with graduate students, but they're still young adults, emerging adults, young people. And we've observed sort of a shift in sort of their needs. And it has really, in some ways, put us, challenged us to sort of rise to the occasion, because the students that we have now, in some ways, feel like they have more needs. I don't want to use the word needy, but they have needs that seem like, we wonder sometimes if we can meet them. And the needs that this, I guess we could say, Generation Z and Alphas, they're very vocal about what's going on with them and what they need and what they expect. And so one thing, one observation I have is, as a psychologist, we always think about how to reframe something so it doesn't, so we can see it in a healthier way and a way that's more empowering. So on the one hand, I could say a lot of my students are very entitled, but on the other hand, I could say they are expressive of what they need. And that's how they've been raised. And so it's really, you know, a powerful, empowering as a faculty member to think about how to meet students where they are and understand where they are, while also providing what we have, which is a unique lens of wisdom and experience, and being able to remember maybe what it was like when we were at that stage of our development. And so I'd like to reframe it as an opportunity to bridge the gap. And some of the observations I have about the students, you know, this generation, but also students who have come of age during COVID, is that they are very much both in need of and desiring connection, but they are used to having it in a particular way. So as we know, social media, electronic, you know, digital connection is their way of operating. And while we may feel like, you know, oh, that's not, you know, that's not real, for them it is. And in fact, I remember when I was applying for graduate school, and one of my undergraduate advisors was talking about one of the universities and said, well, they communicate primarily by email. Why would you want to go there? It's not connected. They use email. So again, this is the cycle of generations and differences, because for me, email was quite comfortable. But for that person, it was like, no, that's not a connection. And so I try to remember things like that in terms of the fact that what's consistent is the human desire and need for connection and to be understood and for safety, and to feel like you're being validated. And so one of the tasks is how to meet students where they are and meet some of those needs. And so in the interest of being practical, because I tend to be in the cloud sometimes and talk very like abstract, but I want to share some of the things that I have found have been helpful for my students, but also in terms of helping me to reframe what they're presenting with and helping me to feel more connected. And it's been enjoyable for me, because when I get in a space of feeling like, oh my God, they're so entitled, it doesn't quite feel so good. But when I get in a space of understanding their way of seeking connection and seeking to find their way in the world, and every generation, part of going into emerging as an adult is to feel like no one understands you. Your generation is unique. No one's been through it, right? So it's that balance between allowing them that space, but also coming in, what I bring is wisdom and experience and remembering what it was like at the age and validating for them. So some of the things that I have found helpful, and this may vary depending on, you know, what you teach, your discipline and structure of the class and so forth, but regular check-ins. And that could be just a few times a semester for a time limited period in the beginning of class. So like 5 minutes, just to check in, like, you know, hey, this is a 13-week semester, we're 3 weeks in, how's everybody doing? It could be something from a color-coded like mood check-in to just a raise your hand if you're okay, or something that makes them feel like their life as individuals matters as well as the material. So, and that's again, up to your comfort level. I'm pretty comfortable with that. But I would again say it should be time limited. So it's not a whole class of like how everybody is feeling horrible and society's a mess, but just a 5 minute, whoever, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5 or something like that. And letting them know that the purpose is just for us to all have awareness of how we're doing, right? And if anybody, I think every class, we kind of know where the counseling centers and all of that stuff, so we can refer them. And if I'm getting close to time, please let me know in the chat. So the other thing is finding ways, if it's appropriate, to integrate big things that are happening into the material. So, and it depends again on your discipline. For me, every class, there's some way that I touch on COVID. Because even though we're quote unquote out of COVID, we're still impacted by it. And so I try to normalize the idea that what they're learning, and I think all of us at our colleges and universities are working to help educate well-rounded students who are engaged citizens and so forth. So just thinking of ways to integrate, okay, 1 minute, and then normalizing their unique generational experience. I can't tell you how excited my students get when I have allowed them to talk about them as Gen Z. Even though stuff that they're saying, I'm like, oh, we did that too. But they have to feel unique. There's like, we're the generation, what did my students tell me, that knows our worth. And I'm like, okay, that's great. So how can we allow you to develop into a well-rounded, professional, they're graduate students, while still knowing your worth? And what is that like for you and your generation? So sort of normalizing and validating what they feel they're struggling with, but also I think a really key part, because even from a trauma-informed lens, we want to help provide an environment of safety, but also encourage resilience. And one thing that I always tell my students, every generation has had to rise to the occasion of its challenges. And it has. You could go back in hindsight, it's 2020, but every generation has had to rise to some challenge. And so what is it that I can share with you that can help you to develop the resilience that you need to be a well-rounded and healthy, well-being and health in the environment are key things that a lot of our students are concerned with. And so I try to tie that language in. So I think I may be at time, but I'm certainly open to any questions later on, and just kind of want to validate that it's hard for us as faculty as well. But I have found that just reframing that, yeah, I actually remember what it was like. And I thought that my struggles were so unique. And it did help when someone a little more experienced gave me and shared some of their wisdom. That was very motivating and helpful to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I appreciate the reminder to have that positive reframe about generational differences as opposed to just complaining. I almost wish the Beloit College list was available so I could sort of reorient in that way. So thank you so much for your remarks. Stacy, why don't we hear from you next?
Great. Hi, everybody. So similar to Nicole, I'm going to start by sharing some observations from my work directing the Learning Support Center at St. Kate's, but then I'll also provide some concrete suggestions for classroom use as well. So I wanted to start by talking about the survey results. In thinking about my talking points for today, I reviewed the sections on motivation and preparedness. And some key takeaways for me were that students are overwhelmed, anxious, having a lot of stress related to academics. And I don't think that's news to anybody in this room. Also, students' motivation and preparedness is really impacted by trouble focusing and constant distraction. But on a positive note, students are more engaged. They're really desiring that community, that connection, as Nicole pointed to. So in thinking about motivation, preparedness, and then the mental health aspect of this, it's clear that the line is kind of a thin line between academics and mental health struggles. And that's something that we've been navigating on a weekly basis in the O'Neill Center. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what our tutors do to help students with anxiety, some of the challenges with that and suggestions for institutions. And then I'm going to kind of shift gears and talk about motivation and how we can really encourage students to be motivated to engage in their education. So a lot of the trends that I saw in the survey are very similar to what we're seeing in the tutoring center. Many students are coming to tutoring feeling anxious and overwhelmed. They often don't know how to get started. So we were used to, at one point, seeing a lot of students procrastinating, bringing in a final draft, wanting help the day before something was due. Now we're saying almost the reverse. Students are coming in with a blank sheet of paper with the assignment description, not really knowing how to interpret the assignment requirements. Some of that does have to do with reading and just wanting help figuring out how to get started, how to get activated. So the role of the tutor has kind of shifted to helping students with near finished products to providing emotional support and getting students to a place mentally where they can move forward and feel comfortable asking their faculty for help as well. I wanted to really emphasize for everyone here, one of the challenges working with tutors in this era is that they have a lot on them to provide not only academic support, but also affective support, emotional encouragement. And we have to, as a tutoring center, do a lot of professional development with our tutors to handle those situations, to have strategies on hand for helping students when there are kind of an academic crisis moments, right? And tutor self-care is very important as well. So our coordinators in our center do in-services in collaboration with the counseling center, where counselors come in, talk about strategies, go through self-care, kind of troubleshoot just different issues that come up in tutoring, and that's been really helpful. So, you know, not only for tutoring, but all academic support services, those strong collaborations between counseling and health and wellness center and other student-facing organizations is, I think, really integral to supporting students and student workers during this time. So along with increasing anxiety, we also sometimes see lack of motivation. And for every student who comes to the tutoring center, there are 3 or 4 who don't come, who aren't seeking out help. The students who are coming and stressed are at least taking that step, right, to voice their frustration, to see what support is available. In thinking about motivation and how important that is, I really wanted to dive deeper into what is motivation, what are some frameworks that we can use to think about concrete steps, concrete pedagogical moves that can increase student motivation to seek help, to come to class, to turn in their work. One framework that I found helpful is the expectancy value cost model. So kind of in a nutshell, expectancy is how well does a student think they can do at this task? It's kind of like self-efficacy, a little bit different, but I'll kind of use them as synonymous. And then there's value. So how valuable is this educational experience for me long-term? And as we know, the value of higher education is being increasingly challenged. So institutions need to do a lot more maybe to emphasize the value, the relevance of curriculum and academic work. And then we have cost. College is expensive. A lot of our students at St. Catherine University, and I'm sure at your institutions as well, work sometimes almost full time, and they're taking 16 credits. So while I, in my position, can't address that, what we can do in academic support and in classrooms is to help students prioritize, to figure out, like, now that I have 30 hours, right, of work and 16 credits, what do I need to do to prioritize to set myself up for success? And sometimes there are things in the day that can be, you know, delegated to others or postponed. It's not easy. I think sometimes I look at students' schedules and think, wow, like, I have a lot of respect that they're able to show up to class, be involved on campus and work, and sometimes take care of their family members as well. So in terms of, like, reframing, I really appreciated what Nicole was saying. And I think if we, maybe if we reframe of what we see as a lack of motivation, as students are already doing a lot, they are motivated to complete their studies and to contribute to their communities. It's just complicated, right? And having conversations about prioritizing ways that they can connect to academic support offices, like outside of the normal workday, right? Online, ways to fit that in can be helpful for students. So I think that accessibility piece of academic support and faculty is really vital as well. I'm pretty sure I'm just about over time. Just a few things briefly that I think faculty can think about doing. And I'll again use this kind of expectancy value cost model. Any activities that provide time in class for students to voice their questions about assignments, to get help from each other. That could be going over an assignment in class, putting students in groups to brainstorm next steps, to ask questions of each other before bringing it to the full classroom can be one way to get students just doing that work of getting started. As far as writing is concerned, doing some writing in class, have students do free writing, write the first paragraph of their paper, spend a few minutes at the beginning or end, integrating that process into your classrooms can get students over that writer's block and move forward. And that can ultimately increase their confidence that they can succeed. Value, I think it's really important to connect curriculum to students' careers. So in my English class that I'm teaching this semester, one of the major projects is about writing in the disciplines. So students research professional writing, academic writing, and public-facing writing in their major, interview faculty and alumni about the types of writing they do, and then write a report on it. So I hope, and it seems like students are excited about this project, but the hope is that they will see its relevance, and also it will increase their confidence to succeed in communicating in their major once they move on to their disciplinary writing courses. I'm happy to talk more about all of these interconnected issues during the Q&A, but I'll pass it on to Jennifer.
Thank you so much. I didn't want to cut Anita off if you were going to talk. As I shared at the start, I am the director of experiential learning at Elms College, and we work collaboratively to have all of our students participate in at least one high impact experiential learning opportunity during their time at Elms. We focus on internships, research, as well as mission trips and community service, study abroad, and community engaged learning. Wanted to share that to say and point out that, like many areas within higher education, the pandemic heavily impacted experiential learning at Elms. Participation in most activities was decreased because of local, state, and college policies. Some parts of experiential learning, such as those connected with travel, came to an entire pause, whereas others were able to transition to virtual and remote options. As the survey results showed, student motivation and preparedness really influenced many areas within higher ed, including experiential learning. Experiential learning is also a strategic goal at Elms College, and we've associated key performance indicators to help us achieve the goals that we're looking at. So some of the things that we're working on and focusing on are faculty experiential learning teaching grants, so that faculty can apply and we can incentivize faculty to build in experiential learning components into their classes. Another thing we're focusing on is the number of students who are participating in experiential learning activities that are tied to donor resources and funding. We're also looking at the number of internship relationships that we have as an institution. And then lastly, we're looking at our overall participation by seniors in experiential learning. We can clearly see that the pandemic impacted us in the work that we do. COVID negatively impacted the number of students interested or motivated or even able to participate in donor-funded experiential learning opportunities, as well as just the opportunities in general. Now that businesses and organizations are fully opening again, or having a new normal, if you will, we're continuing to market those opportunities to students from the point of admission through graduation. We're on track to continue to hit those performance indicators I mentioned, while keeping an eye now on student motivation and preparedness, which was a big theme in the survey and something that we had come across ourselves in the work that we do. Like many campuses, our students were and still are impacted consistently with motivation and preparedness, and it's something that we're continuing to work on and improve. Elm students appear to be motivated to participate in experiential learning when there's funding that can be provided, and when it can aid in their achievement of a career or a personal goal or dream. I think Stacy just mentioned, and it's true for our students as well, many of our students are working multiple jobs for multiple reasons on top of going to school. So I know for me personally, one of my favorite things is to be able to give students scholarship funds for an unpaid internship. To watch someone be able to achieve a goal while also staying afloat, I think is a great thing that we've been able to do Additionally, some points on things that we're working on to continue to build upon the campus capacity for experiential learning after the pandemic is that we're looking to expand our curricular opportunities and our internships. So some strategies that we're currently using that have worked for us is working to do things that are like to improve experiential learning in the things we're already doing. So for example, we have a first year seminar, making sure that all first year students are informed about experiential learning, to talk with them about the things that they did in high school or at a previous institution that would be considered experiential learning and how it's helped them prepare for their studies. Additionally, we'll work with our career services area to highlight experiential learning opportunities at our career fairs. And then we also, and this year, we're hoping to expand upon, showcase the work that students are doing, as well as faculty, in the realm of experiential learning. So really teaching everyone how to showcase off the work that they're doing, which then encourages others to want to do it. Additionally, we provide our information and our opportunities in various ways. So offering face-to-face and virtual programming with an eye to specific student needs and wants, creating resources for students to aid in their preparedness for experiential learning with virtual resources, workshops, one-on-one training, etc. That kind of goes hand in hand. If they feel prepared, they may feel motivated. We're working with our faculty to build community-based engagement as part of their courses. Additionally, we're focusing on collaboration across divisions and across departments to help students succeed with a continued eye and ear towards mental health, academic career readiness, motivation, and overall preparedness. As I mentioned earlier, one of the big things we work on is continuing to secure funding for students for unpaid internships and research, and to work with faculty on creating community engagement within their coursework, which is really rewarding for everyone. And then additionally, we're working to build and even, to be honest, rebuild some of the relationships that the college had with community partners. So many things changed for so many during the pandemic. We're working to reconnect and see how can we work together as community partners. And then the last two things and strategies that we're working on is really sharing with students the benefits, which can really help with their motivation of doing community and civic engagement, which is tied to the area that I oversee. And again, that is mostly through our showcases. And then lastly, working again with our career services department and faculty to continuously build internships and to create partnerships and opportunities so that students in all majors can figure out in a creative way how they can get engaged both in and out of the classroom and the realm of experience. So those are some of the strategies and thoughts that we had for me. Thank you.
Thanks, all three of you. Those were very insightful comments. I'm thinking now about the importance of connections across academic and all of the student support services as a way for us to move forward, or sort of like how all three of you said, we're in the same boat as the students in terms of our levels of mental capacity and workload capacity, et cetera. So thank you for the nuggets that you shared. We will open it up to the floor for questions now. So feel free to submit questions in the chat. You can also raise your hand and unmute, and we'll take questions directly. And as people are getting aligned with questions, I think I would like to ask all three of you, what are some of the strategies that you're using yourself to help with your own motivation and working with students now?
So I'll go ahead. So we're constantly, especially in the mental health field, talking to the students about self-care. And before COVID, it's like, oh, here they go again, But the students, I've been a little more transparent about my need for self-care and what it feels like to reach a point of burnout or feeling like you're reaching your capacity, and just to humanize it and normalize it. So I've been finding that the students are, when I bring up self-care, it's not like, oh, here she goes again. It's like a real thing. Yes. Oh, someone said, how can we avoid oversharing or asking for a confession? Yes. So, and all of my classes, I actually say that this is a classroom. While we might relate things to our personal experiences, if we're struggling, like I'm pretty explicit about not sharing too much personal stuff for your own well-being. And for myself, I try to they appreciate stories about when I was at that stage. So like, I really know what it's like to feel imposter syndrome, or to feel like you've learned everything in the books, but then when it's time to apply it, and that can result in feeling like X, Y, and Z. Or just for myself, I'll just say I'm continually learning. And so sometimes I might still struggle. So I try to make it vague. Like, I'm not going to be like, yesterday my kids were screaming and I had a meltdown or something, but just more so like, you know, normalizing some of the feelings. But that's a great question. I'm really because no one wants to come in and their professor is like sharing their whole life, and you know, it's clear that they're not coping as well.
Sometimes there may be a little too much empathy. Appreciate that comment. We have a question in the chat about working with alumni. We've sort of talked about collaborations across student support services. Are you finding work with alumni as a support or a way to sort of increase the workload and help with motivation?
I'll just jump in, and more of it is ideas to come. So I actually just met with our alumni relations area to talk about how I can work with them in kind of really two ways. One is probably the selfish way for my department. How can you get me more money? All the time. I want all the money to get to all the students. And I joke, but in certain areas that is a conversation that you want to make sure you're talking to your alumni area. Here are all of my wonderful ideas. If you know of anyone that wants to fund students to do X, Y, Z. And then the other piece is to go on, I think what Tom was referencing. So as I had mentioned, we're working to put together a showcase. And as part of that showcase, I want to be able to connect alums back to campus, whether that's coming to watch the showcase itself and or to participate in a panel or to work collaboratively with some of our classes. So that's an area that I think is really important. I myself am and was a very active alum to my undergrad. And I think almost to kind of go off the point Nicole just mentioned regarding as a faculty member, it's kind of the same thing. I think if students see faculty or staff or an alum doing well, or how they're coping or how they're motivated, that always gets people going. I think it's easier to see someone else doing something to motivate yourself to kind of go, oh, I see myself in them. Even using the phrasing imposter syndrome. I think for a student to hear a faculty use that phrasing to go like, wait, you had a moment when you weren't on top of your game, and to maybe you don't have to go too personal into it, but to just showcase that I think is big. And I think alums are, especially young alums, because as the older they get, they're maybe not as relatable based on students' thoughts and feelings. But those are some thoughts I had on regards to the alumni piece as well as the motivation piece. I really think owning that. And then the other piece I was going to throw into regarding motivation, I think one of the things I see a lot from our students is just a little bit of overwhelmedness, I'm going to use that word, in time management. Like they understand the material, they understand what's being asked of them, but they can't figure out how to get it all organized. And I think it's important that that doesn't have to just be one department on campus helping students read a syllabi or figuring out their time management skills. I literally had a student the other day who came by and I said, hey, I can see this a little differently for you. So I think that's something that can be of assistance in helping students stay motivated, is to help them get organized as well.
Yeah, and I'll also respond to the question about alumni. I touched upon the class I'm teaching and how the Writing the Disciplines assignment is going to connect students with alumni. So we're partnering with our career development office to do a session on networking, and we're going to integrate professional email communication into that as well. And then they'll reach out to alumni in their majors to learn more about their work as well as the type of professional communication they do. We haven't had alumni work with the extended orientation program I mentioned, but we do have faculty and junior and senior level students do roundtables with new students to talk about types of failure they've encountered and how they've overcome that. So I remember one faculty talked about how she failed her first nursing class and sought academic support and bounced back, and now she's a faculty member, right, working with these students. And students really appreciated that chance to hear about faculty's own stories of failure and help-seeking behavior. So I think that alumni would be an awesome group to do similar work.
Thank you both for those answers. I have a follow-up question for you that came a little bit from Jennifer's question and something that you had stated earlier, Stacy, and I think I was having flashbacks in my own house of the stare at the blank paper. So how much do you think the faculty prompts around assignments should change or maybe adjust to this particular generation? I think sometimes when we say, write a term paper, we've got a sense of the time it would take, the importance of outlining or conducting a literature review, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that we are at the point where we might need to be more explicit or to give more direct prompts or to help intentionally in the syllabus around time management?
Yeah, I can answer that. And I think from my own experience, both, so I teach at Elms for first year students in the first year seminar. And then I also teach at nighttime for students that are in a Master's of Higher Education program. And I see it at both levels. I think there needs to be very clear, specific, black and white written into the syllabus what we're expecting. I think there's definitely a disconnect sometimes from students, and from what I've seen, if it's not written down, even if you explicitly went over it in class, it may not make its way to the paper when they go to actually write it. And I've also seen that they're very good with our learning management systems. So I've really tried to make my learning management pages literally be the electronic version of my syllabus. So my syllabus may be long and have a lot of words that are describing what I'm expecting and have rubrics and information, but then all of that I translate to our learning management system. Sometimes they're better at it than we are. The amount of times that I'm like, oh, there was an app for that. And they're like, on their phones, knowing how to do it all. Those are some thoughts I have on it. I think the amount of times that I could feel myself be like, I wouldn't have needed all this information, but it seems like you do. So I need to get out of my own way and maybe accommodate in that way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think being explicit is key. Just a counterpoint to that, I've also seen assignment descriptions that are 10 pages long and list out every single thing that's expected, and that is also overwhelming. So I think, keeping it to a page, but being very clear about the purpose of the assignment so students know why they're doing it. Just very clear guidance around structure and how it will be assessed. I think a lot of times the overwhelm from students around writing relates to grammar and APA and doing things perfect, right? And sometimes that just the ideas and the overall purpose of the assignment gets lost in that. So, my 2 cents: prioritize higher order content, understand and use of sources, and encourage students to seek tutoring help for that, as well as some of those sentence level concerns, while acknowledging both are important.
I would also add that I really love that the whole being explicit in writing and speaking, because it provides a sense of certainty. And so part of when we don't have certainty or feel we don't have control, it's overwhelming. And I think doing that allows us to then have the conversation, because I know part of what I'm training my students for is to be able to tolerate ambiguity and everything isn't black and white. So when I can make things really clear and explicit, then it creates almost like a container. So it's okay, let's lean into where we need to develop critical thinking, or it's not just a this or that type of answer. So I think that's helpful.
Okay, so we have a question about the encouragement for faculty grants for experiential learning. And the question is, any ideas for humanities classes?
I'll start, but I feel like this could be a group think for everyone in theory. So I think normally, so if you were on my campus, it would be a let's go have coffee, let's come to my office and let's just talk, let's talk it out. What's the class? What's the topic? What could be areas of interest? And I think for me, I tend to think out of the box. I also come from a humanities background. I'm a proud history major from undergrad. And I'm always like, I'm still using it every day. I make sure there's record. But the reason I was joking about history is that I recently in the fall worked to have a out of the box English opportunity happen. And that came through conversation with the faculty and a student, and we were able to make something happen that was a little bit out of the box. And it was tied to poetry, which worked with the class, which worked with one of our partners off campus. And we were able to create an internship for the student, but then a partnership with the class. And that tends to be a lot of the conversation points that I have with our faculty is to really like, what are they passionate about? What could be tied to the class? And then are there opportunities I know of in the area that we can kind of connect it to? So that sometimes it's a chicken and egg situation where it could be two things could be happening at once. And I just know that they're going to work well together. So it really would be, I mean, humanities is a very broad area, but if you were to drill down, I think, and I also would be happy to chat offline if you wanted to brainstorm further as well.
I have one additional question for you. We've talked about sort of connecting and collaborating across academics with student support services around motivation and persistence and retention and engagement. How do you think faculty can connect with each other in supporting students in this area? I know I have one group of faculty who said maybe we should sit down as a unit and say, when are your big assignments coming so that we coordinate and students aren't at the end of the semester all with all of the big student assignments. But do you have ideas about faculty within departments or faculty with each other around these issues?
I just have a quick idea, which is probably just to communicate with each other to the best of our abilities. I think there's no way on any college campus that we're not going to get to the end of the semester and have some weeks where there's just a lot of assignments due. But I think there is ways for us to chat, and that's talking to your chair or talking to your colleagues in your area. And then maybe even just checking in with your students. I tend to be someone that likes to stick to my syllabi and my dates and my deadlines. I've had to learn and grow as a professional and as a faculty member to maybe be a little loose depending on the situation. But I think that that can be a conversation point and a thing that as an institution to try to figure out, as well as are there ways for you to also give heads up to your support services on your campuses. So if that's tutoring or if that's counseling or whatever, I think that can be helpful as well to kind of say, hey, there's going to be a really big nursing exam. They're all going to be really anxious. And here's what we're doing to help, provide assistance.
Thanks for that, Jennifer. Dan, I see you've raised your hand.
Yeah, just a thought on that, sort of getting students prepared for large assignments and also the time management thing. I found that pretty consistently students were waiting right to the end to even begin assignments. And no matter how much encouragement in emails, I'd even use capital letters and things like that in the emails, usually weeks in advance. I couldn't get people, the bulk of the class, to do things. And so I sort of retooled the way I do the class, a lot of my classes and class assignments, in that a lot of the projects are due at the end. However, they are sort of the final stage of a multi-step process. So a research process, we start with literature reviews, and then that's due, and they get to shape their PICO questions and results. And so to kind of work with the time management, to work with large projects, I end up sort of breaking things out over the course of the semester. And then I sort of usually I revel in the end of the class and I go, do you see how much time it takes and how all of these pieces ended up coming together? And I can do visual overviews and things like that. So, I had to retool because I frankly, all the warnings and threats and things in the world weren't motivating. I sort of had to recreate the sequence and timing of the processes. And that seems to, I'm hoping, I don't know how that's going to impact their future management of larger projects, but at least within my realm where I could have interaction with them, I was able to demonstrate. I think I've been able to demonstrate that. So
thanks for sharing that. I think breaking the assignments up so that you can help them coordinate the time is really helpful. But the overlay of this is the process, that is a skill set that will carry on beyond your courses. So thanks for sharing that example.
I think the same process could be used for reading too. I think we are dealing with a time in which students have reduced attention spans. So submitting or completing a 20-page reading assignment might not be as easy for students as it used to be. So doing some reading in class, like chunking it out into smaller readings over a longer period of time could also be helpful.
According to the research by Gene Twenge, they read an average of 7 minutes a week. So that was distressing to me to learn. I don't know how to chunk up smaller reading assignments, but that's something to think about. If we have time for one additional question or comment. Or Stacy, Nicole, and Jennifer, do you have any last words of wisdom that you want to share before we summarize and close out?
I would just say that I like the idea and the discussion around sharing the purpose, because when we create our syllabi, we're not just picking straws out of the air. We have a clear purpose and understanding of what skills and abilities we're trying to help our students develop. So I like to kind of share that with them and say that, like, yes, while I'm willing to make adjustments, like even with due dates and chunking things down, I like that, and making assignments into a process, that there's some muscles that have to be built. Like if you're going to be an Olympic athlete, there's certain things you just have to, they can't make the race shorter or whatever it is. So there's some skills that I kind of try to explain, kind of like planting seeds, that you're going to have to learn sometimes how to do a bunch of stuff at once for a short period of time, like a lot of assignments, but these are things that are going to help you develop skills. So I just try to kind of reaffirm why certain things are on the syllabus and adjustments I'm willing to make, but certain things that I would hope that they would learn. So, sometimes you get the blank stares, but sometimes you hope that it gets through.
Jennifer or Stacy, last words?
I'm not sure if it was Jennifer or Nicole who's mentioned this, but I really appreciated the point that time management and study skills doesn't need to be the purview of one office on campus. I think partnering with academic support centers around time management strategies and tips, and then bringing that into your classroom is one approach to thread it more into all the conversations happening, and then sharing your own tips and experiences as well with students as appropriate.
And I think my closing thought, one of the things that came up for me was when Nita, you were just talking about reading. And I had a student in the fall literally just be like, I don't like to read. And we were in the middle of reading a common reading that all the first years are reading. And I just paused and kind of said, let's just take a step back. Where are you here? Like literally here at college. And we had a conversation on the why, the overarching goals, dreams. I said, all right, pause. We need to do this to get to that. So so one of the things I feel like oftentimes when I feel like either I'm having a day of low motivation or a student is, what's the why? Why, and then how can I, whether it's help myself or help someone else, get you there? I consistently feel, for me, like that's what gets me going. When I know that I can help a student, like in experiential learning, obviously there are times when I can really connect, like, oh, you want to go do that someday? cool, do this, that'll help get you there. And I think that can be done both in the classroom and out of the classroom, and also can serve as a reset if they're struggling in a variety of different ways. It's just another way to kind of connect with a student, and understanding the why, and also potentially what is causing maybe a little bit of a roadblock. And is it just are they having trouble communicating? I had a student one time do the opposite of communication, and I was like, what's going on? I feel like this doesn't match you. And he's like, well, I need to go to work. I'm like, if you had just said that you had to go to work, there could have been a different conversation. So also helping them understand how to own their commitment. And I'm going to go like ... commitments, because they're not, most of our students are not just going to class. You also work 40 hours a week. Okay, how do we make this all work? It goes back to that time management piece. But those are some things that are haunting me at the moment as a closing thought.
Thanks so much for that, Jennifer. I will echo Claude Steele's work in Whispering Vivaldi. And if you've not read that one, that's a great resource. But he sort of ends with one of the good ways to end stereotype and a little of the imposter phenomenon is to have a mission narrative. We've tried to start adapting that in the orientation of why are you coming to college, and having them write that and keep it posted in the hard time. So some research based to that idea, Jennifer. Thanks for sharing that. I think I will add my closing summaries. I'm so grateful to the three of you for sharing your insights and your suggestions and tips. I do want to say a little bit about that sense of preparedness. We do have to remind ourselves and remember that K-12 education is different. They're on apps. They use a lot of Google Pearson apps. They start with iPads. And so reading as a skill and a muscle, I appreciate you talking about the muscles and the skill sets along with the academic content, that may have to be taught and thought about more explicitly as we're working with the generation coming in. They don't have textbooks like we did and highlighted and earmarked and folded the pages or take notes in the way that we did. They're used to apps and short materials. I'm so grateful for the, the sense of the reframe about working with this generation. And the sense of the importance of connecting to our students and really being empathic, understanding. That might mean that we need to be a little bit more flexible in our approach and our work with students. It does, I think, mean that we need to do the check-ins at the beginning of class, during office hours, on research projects and engaged learning opportunities. It's a little bit of extra work for us, but I think goes a long way on that sense of belonging with a lot of our institutions are moving towards. Thank you, Stacy, for the EVC model. I'm going to keep thinking about expectancy and value and the cost as we go through. I don't know, it might be time to do some unique incentives. I love what Dan shared in terms of breaking that apart. Maybe you have an M&M party. If you did your outline, come eat M&Ms, granola bars, or something with me. It might mean that you do some TikTok dancing with the students as they, do milestones. It might, sort of require some new creativity on our part. And maybe that would help us to shift our motivation as well. So I see a lot of videos of the K-12 teachers dancing with their students to engage. I don't know, maybe we should have a college professor dance off, who knows? So thank you, the three of you again, Jennifer, Stacy, and Nicole. What wonderful insights that you provided for us. And Martha, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nita. And on behalf of the Association of Colleges, the Sisters of St. Joseph, and the Chief Academic Officers, thank you all for being here today. And a big thank you to Anita for your moderation, and Nicole, Stacy, and Jennifer for sharing with us more about your work and some strategies. I hope you'll join us for our other workshops in our series. On March 30th, we will have a panel discussing quality of learning. And then on April 18th, what is new and different for faculty post-pandemic? We'd love to hear your feedback from the workshop today. After this workshop, you'll be sent a short evaluation. It'll take you 1 to 2 minutes. So I hope you'll be willing to provide us with some feedback about your experience. Again, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.